Okay.
Welcome, everybody. So the first thing I wanted to do today, this is an iyun shir. So I wanted to actually, I want to deal with a few issues today. We're going to spend most of our time on halachic issues on the second sugya, but I want to go back to that first sugya on Chet Amud Bet Meitive, right? Where we challenge from our Mishnah with the Hayu Shnayim Rochavim al Gebe Mima or Echad Rochav Echad Manhig. And there was something that it came up last time, but I want to just bring it up, right? Rashi, I'll ask, who did Rashi say this, the Meitive was a tiyufta to?
Rav Yehuda.
Rav Yehuda, right? But here's my question. Why isn't the Mishnah a problem for Shmuel? Right? Shmuel, who said that between Rahuv and Manhig, one of them works and one of them doesn't. We said it must be that he's talking about Rahuv bimkom Manhig, right? That the two in the same, they're both happening at the same time. And the Mishnah says Rahuv Manhig, Yachloku. So why isn't this a problem for Shmuel? So I throw that out there. I think Rashi has a solution. He doesn't say it explicitly, but go no.
Wait, explain your question again.
Good. So right, Shmuel seems to say that according to even not according to Rav Yehuda. Let's just say in general we've agreed that Shmuel says that if you have a case of one person is Rahuv and one person is Manhig, one of them is Koneh and one of them is not Koneh. Our Mishnah seems to explicitly say Rachuv Manhig Yachloku. Sounds like they're both konim, right? So why isn't this a problem for Shmuel? Why does the Gemara? Why does Rashi think this is a tiyufta on Rav Yehuda and not also a tiyufta on Shmuel? In fact, actually, like the Gemara might have written in a different language if it were a tiyufta on Shmuel. So that's my question. Noam, I saw your hand. Does that question? Let me just check. That question makes sense to people? Yeah. So Noam, what do you have? And then Sarah next after.
I mean, my brain is still warming up, especially with this now old sugya. So I hope this makes sense. But just when Rav Yehuda speaks, right, he says Nechazei Anan. Rav Yosef says that Rav Yehuda says Nechazei Anan.
Yeah.
And then he's quoting a girsa that Shmuel has, but it's actually Rav Yehuda who's making the inference when it comes to Rachuv and Manhig. Like all we know about Shmuel is Hayoshev bekaron sofeg et arba'im v'chachamim potrim et hayoshev bekaron. Like all we have is that tradition, but we don't necessarily know that Rav Yehuda is right about making the extrapolation about Rachuv and Manhig.
True, but the Mishnah could still be a problem for Shmuel in that Shmuel does say that one of them is Koneh and one's not, and the Mishnah seems to directly fly in the face of that.
Shmuel's also he's first generation.
Oh, good. This is the start of
like a Safek Tana. He has his own Mishnah. Like not many Amorim have that. Like
good. This is the start of my answer, actually, in some ways. But let's see, Sarah, you had something you wanted to say about it too.
I was going to say something similar to what Noam said. So
I want to read a Rashi, and this may help us. Or maybe let me put out this question. Let me do it differently. If you're Shmuel and someone brought you this Mishnah, who would Shmuel say authored this Mishnah? I think Rav Nachum sees where I'm going with this, but I can see that look. Yes, indeed. So, all right, well, let's read a Rashi, and maybe this will help. This is, where was that Rashi? Inema Rebbe Meir. Someone want to read that Rashi? Josie.
Inema Rebbe Meir. Amar Yoshev Karon Sofeg et Harbaim Umatnitin Yechidaa Hi Velate Hilchata Kavate. So he's saying here that this is Rebbe Meir against Rabbanan and the Rabbanim, and he's a Dad Yachid, and so we don't paskin this way.
Exactly. In other words,
What does Yechidei refer to?
It refers to the dot of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is against the Rabbanan. It's the Rebbe Meir wrote this Mishnah. He's a dot Yachid. He thinks that Rachuv and Manhig are equal to each other, right? And you might even have to say it because maybe it's not obvious that one is derived from the other. Maybe there is a difference, that whole thing we had before. Shmuel say, that's Rebbe Meir who thinks that Rachuv is Kona. I don't think Rachuv is Kona. And by the way, that Mishnah is a dot Yachid. What do I care? I can go against the dot Yachid Mishnah, especially if I'm a first generation Amora, who's like barely an Amora, right? You know, like you're kind of straddling that line. I think that's why. I think that Shmuel would say Rebbe Meir is the author of the Mishnah. And so therefore it's not really, the Mishnah is not necessarily a challenge to Shmuel. It is necessarily a challenge to Rav Yehuda until we change what Rachuv means to mean, right?
It's not a challenge to anybody's opinion, because they can always say it's Yechidai. It's
exactly. Yeah.
But it's only a kasha to the one who tries to use it as an authoritative halachic source and then bring from it a proof. And that's Rabbi Yehuda.
Exactly. So good. That was just my thought on because it was bothering me. Like, why is Rashi so committed? And a lot of people are like, I've seen have gotten stuck on, well, Meitive, who's it challenging? Because the Gemara is very opaque about that. So I just wanted to throw out that idea. I thought that was, I don't know.
Thank you. That's a very important point. Yeah. Very good clarification.
I haven't looked to see if there's like someone else who says that, but I think Rashi is hinting at it very strongly. He knows what's going on. But okay. Now I want to go into our the second Gemara. We did it last time, but I want to read it again at a decent pace, not too quickly, but at a decent pace since we've seen it already. And really, I want to spend time on the halachic issues today. If we go at the end, if we have a little bit of time extra, there's a Tosfot Harosh I brought that I added in that we may take a look at, but that's not my major focus. So let's read, starting with the Tashma. On the bottom of Chet Amud Bet. Let's see. Somebody want to read? Don't all jump up at once. This is Jessica, please go for it.
Tashma, שניים שהיו מושכים בגמל ומנהיגים בחמור, או שהיה אחד מושך ואחד מנהיג, מידה זאת קנו. רבי יהודה אומר, לעולם לא קנה עד שתהא משיכה בגמל והנהגה בחמור. So our Braita says, if you have, I'm not going to try and translate moshchin and manhig, and
you shouldn't just leave them as
helpful. Like that seems like a recipe for. But so you have two people doing mashicha with a camel, and two people doing manhig with a donkey, or maybe you have one person doing mashicha and one person doing hanhaga. With this measure they acquire, and Rabbi Yehuda says they only acquire with mashicha for a camel or hanhaga for a donkey.
Great. And I just want to point out that the way we're going to initially read it, although our Gemara is not concerned with actually the halacha here, they're more concerned with what's excluded, but they're going to read it that there's 4 total possibilities, right? The two actions, 2 animals, right? 4 possibilities. Rebbe Yehuda thinks only 2 of them work, 2 of those combinations work, and the Rabbanan think 4 out of 4 work. That is the way we're originally going to read this. I just want to put that out. I think it's just a helpful frame. Okay, Jessica, keep going a little bit.
כתנא מיהת, או שהיה אחד מושך ואחד מנהיג, מושך ומנהיג, אין אבל רכוב, לא. So what's this Braita really teaching us? Maybe it's teaching us this extra clause about the one person who's doing Mashiach and one person who's doing Hanhaga, in order to teach that both Mashiach and Hanhaga do acquire, but riding would not acquire.
Exactly.
Hu hadin de'afilu rechuv v'hada katani mashiach u'manhig labhuke mid Rabbi Yehuda de'amar ad shetei mashicha b'gamal v'hanhaga b'chamor kamashmalan de'afilu ifcha nami kane. Now, indeed, even riding would acquire. And what this writer is teaching us, with the case of one person is doing Mashiach and one person's doing Hanhaga, is to exclude Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, where he says that only 2 of those 4 combinations work, and so we should learn that even the reverse 2 also work.
Exactly. So, but then we're going to challenge this, right? So keep going a little bit more.
Vihachi ravinhu uyitznunhu shnayim shehu moshchin umanhigin bein begamal bein bechamor ikachad sad delo kane. Ika de amre mashicha bechamor ika de amre hanhaga begamal.
Good.
So if so, let us swap it and teach it that you have 2 people who were doing Mashicha and Hanhaga, whether with a camel or a donkey. There is 1 box.
Okay, I would stop. I think that's the suggestion, right? That's how you could have taught it, right? Is you could have just said, right, Mashicha, Hanhaga, Gamal, Chamor, mix them up as you will, as a nice short way to teach this whole principle. Right? Every once in a while, a drash and shul, I want to say Leir Vinhu Vitlit Ninhu, right? You could do this much better. So we could do it that way. So why don't we? Why don't we teach it in a much nicer, shorter format? Right. And so the answer is Ika Chad Sad de Lokane, right? So
So
the
Jessica. Answer is, it's not that all 4 of those boxes work. 1 box does not work, but we're not sure whether that is Hanhaga with a camel or whether it is Mashicha with a camel.
Great.
With a donkey.
All right, and we got the other side, which is there are maybe like some slight differences in how they get there, but it's essentially the same thing. There's one, I don't want to make a diuk on it at the moment, so we're going to skip the second half of it, which is just, a different deriving from the bimidah zot kanu. Instead, I want people to throw out the halachic questions we have now, right? About what is and is not kona for a gamal, for a chamor. Why is it not kona? What cases are we talking about? What don't we know at this point? So you just jump in, throw out a question. One of the things we don't know is explicit in the Gemara. What that means isn't so explicit, but
One thing we don't know is what exactly Mashicha and Hanhaga are.
Good. That's one which I don't think will ever be answered by any of the sources I brought. I'm sure other sources answer it. There are other sources, but nothing that but Jessica, it's a great point. So yeah.
Wait, I didn't hear the point. Could you repeat it?
Can I repeat it, Jessica, and see if I got it right for you? This is like, what actually are the actions of Mashicha and Hanhaga? Like, how can you tell if somebody's doing? Did I have that right, Jessica? I just want to make sure. Yeah.
I mean,
I know.
Don't we have some idea about that? Didn't we see these mishnas in Kiddushin? That Hanhaga is calling to the animal, having it come, and hitting it and making it move. And Mashicha was not mentioned, but Mashicha is presumably pulling on its reins. Also, all of these have to cause it to lift its foot, move forward.
Here's the problem with that, Rav Nachum, is that if you guys go to Chet Amud Bet, right? There's a Rashi. It's towards the top of the narrow lines in Rashi, right next to the beginning of the Gilyon HaShas. Any Rashi next to an Rebbe Akiva Eger has got to be good, right? So manhig lechude mi'ika lamande mardelokane, right? So is there someone who says that manhig by itself doesn't kone? Ha meshichahi. So so Hanhaga and Mashicha or Hanhaga is sometimes categorized as a type of Mashicha?
Right. Well, yeah, because Hanhaga, ha-Mashicha.
Yeah. So is this, this could be a case of like Bishul and Korban Pesach, right? Where sometimes Bishul refers to all forms of cooking and sometimes Bishul refers to boiling. You can do right. There is a pasuk that says that the Korban Pesach should be
Mashicha. The way I would explain it is that Mashicha is the general category.
Yeah.
I think that's what the Mishnah said in Kiddushin, as I recall. Mashicha is the general category, And what this Rashi is saying, ha mashichahu, it means it is a type, manhig is a type of mashicha.
Yeah.
So right, there is mashicha is also a type of mashicha.
Exactly. Mashiach is a set that contains itself, right? In some
Yeah,
ways.
well, no, it means two different things. It means two different things. One, it means a category, and one, it means the specific act of mashicha.
So, but yeah, I mean, this is going to be the question, right? In a lot of ways. But I still like the question. I think that even though we get specific actions, like what does mashicha mean here? Does it mean like what we think it means, just like literally dragging the animal, or does it mean something else?
Well, I don't see any reason to say otherwise. But in the meantime,
Good. That's all right.
let's,
What else?
let's use that as I always like a working hypothesis. Let's take that as our working hypothesis.
I'll go with it. So, it's any. I had a few other hands, other halachic questions that we have at this point. I know Rav Lexi had one. I think Noah maybe had one, or Sarah had one. Sarah, go for it. We'll start with you.
If let's say we have a camel and one person tries to do a kinyan with mashicha and another person does hanhaga, whose camel is it?
Good. I want to sharpen your question too. Is like, is this whole thing where we're talking about 3 out of 4 work? Is that the case where there's 2 people trying to do a kinyan, or just 1 person trying to do a kinyan?
Right.
It's
And
not
also,
so...
I guess you can just to like fill that out. Is that maybe this is just stealing this with Rush, but like, are we just talking about how you do a kinyan in general? Are we talking about how you do a kinyan from hefker only?
Good.
Or only not from hefker?
Yeah.
Which I think is basically is a kind of another way of getting at like, is this about a Metzia or not? Is this about two contesting claims or just one claim?
Yeah. Which is not so clear from our Braita, right? You think the Shnaim Shayu Moshlim Begamal, and also its context, maybe it is about Metzia. On the other hand, in fairness, we thought maybe the Stam reading of our Mishnah is that it's about Metzia, and we already said it's actually not only about Metzia, it's about Mekach Memkar too. So it's never so clear what these things are about. Good. Anything else?
When we say that the Stam Mishnah is about Mekach Memkar, we don't mean that like that's generally how you do Mekach Memkar. It's like it can be applied to a Mekach Memkar case of Mamun Hamut Talbas Afik, which is like a little bit narrower.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, this is just how you buy stuff, right? Like that's not.
Yeah. So, well, that's the whole thing. Is our Mishnah even teaching about kinyan at all? Well, this one's clearly teaching about method of kinyan, right? That seems to be fairly clear. Good. Any other halacha questions that come up? Yeah, Max, please.
I think we're left in doubt still about what Rachuv does or doesn't accomplish.
Great, right? Rachuv is, we've made the Braita work with Rachuv, right? We've made it work in a way that Rachuv can still be koneh. We just don't know if it is or not. In fact, if we say that Rachuv is not koneh, well, then what can we say about this entire sugya? This will be important to the Rosh in a lot of ways. So.
It's irrelevant, right? You could just say the whole thing. This is only this whole back and forth, or at least part of it. Obviously, you still have to reckon with the Braita itself, but some of the analysis of it you could just throw away because you could say that analysis is only relevant if we want to describe this Braita as not excluding Rechuv. But also, if you say Rechuv, first of all, if everyone seems to be talking about the question of Rechuv is when it's not manhig baraglav. Right, everybody seems to agree that Rechuv that is manhig baraglav, at least in general, is koneh, right? So then the question is, okay, well, first of all, even for those who think Rechuv that is not manhig baraglav is not koneh, Rechuv that is manhig baraglav, is that just considered to be like the same as this other type of manhig that we're talking about? Would that slot into the paradigm? However we answer those other questions that were asked, would Rechuv that is manhig baraglav just fall under the manhig category? Would it be a separate one? If it's a separate one, is that darko with a bunch of animals? Is it not darko? How does it go? How does it compete with others, even if it works by itself? And if Rechuv that is not manhig baraglav is also koneh, then again, is that only by itself, but it would be canceled out by one of these others, or actually it would be koneh even in combination with one of the others?
Great. And you brought up, I just want to repeat, right? It's a whole question of even if Rechuv doesn't work, where does Rechuv Umanhig Baraglav sit in this whole hierarchy? Is there a hierarchy, right? And you also brought up the other really interesting question of, is this about Darko, right? The normal way you acquire something versus not? Is this a way of saying that in general, anything works for an animal, but there are some exceptions? Or is it a way of saying only derech works, the normal way works, and that's all we're talking about here, right? These are all questions that are sitting out there for us. And we'll remain, I mean, the post scheme will try to answer these, of course, right? That's their job. But I think just reading the sugya, there's no clear answer necessarily. Is there?
Isn't
Yeah,
it
Rav
also
Nachman.
possible? Isn't it also possible that we've already settled the question of Rachuv Levad is not Kone, and now we're just seeing if we can bring more, like, put another nail in the coffin. We're try to, we've already really proven it. Even if we don't prove it from this Tashma, it doesn't really matter because we've already proved it already.
But it's already, and this is just helping us with that.
This is just another indication because in the previous Amud we kind of proved it.
I feel like, but we didn't prove it. We proved that that's Shmuel's opinion, right? But we absolutely did not prove that that is necessarily.
Well, we brought a bunch of
halacha.
statements that in a Metzia you need dat makne. We brought a bunch of statements like that. We brought two statements.
Right, but that was like about also getting at what do we think the tvisa relevance is, right? That like we give these explanations, but like it is absolutely, I think, not proven from bet that is the halacha. It seems to be proven that is Shmuel's position on the halacha, right? But to say rechuv, everyone has agreed that it's not konem, is hard for, I think, a couple of reasons, especially given the nature of the next tashma that we'll see.
But we have this itmar also that Amar,
right, which is about mostly
Rabbi Chelbo, Amar Rav Huna,
which is not necessarily the only factor that we think is relevant in purely whether rechuv is able to be konem.
I mean, I will say personally, I think, well, it's clear that it's not clear. It seems that Shmuel thinks, right, at least from the way Rav Yehuda plays it out, Shmuel thinks that by the time you get to the end of this entire set of sugyot on Tet Amud Bet, I think we leave it in the air, truthfully. I don't think we ever fully decide it. We do have the out that we keep using of Rachuv Manhig Biraglav anytime we don't like something that tries to prove one way. That is the but
I think that there's I think ultimately we say that the Rambam seems to paskin that rechuv that is not manhig baraglav does acquire. And I think one of the reasons given for that is that the shakla vitaria, right, the fact that it spends so much time trying to deal with this, including ones trying to prove, oh, maybe rechuv lo kane, oh, you can't prove that. And then we'll see another tashma that's trying to prove rechuv kane, right? The fact that it is so concerned with this, some of them are like, yeah, I put like all the terutzim for why, oh, this doesn't prove rechuv kane often are this dachuk, like, oh, every single time it's only actually referring to this specific type of rechuv that everyone agrees on.
Good. It's Noam, go for it.
Well, I just had a question about that because I don't fully understand. It seems to me like from the mini sugya we just read, that Jessica just read, like that we conclude halachically that rechuv is kane from the Baraita. It's not clear to me how to read it otherwise.
I don't think we prove that rechuv is kane. I think we say that we can leave open the possibility that rechuv is kane, or rechuv is not excluded by this.
Who adinda filu rechuv?
Saying that can't be the case.
Yeah, it's a
right?
possibility.
Like,
sorry, Lexi, you said maybe? You said it's maybe the case?
Right, that like there's nothing that's being, certainly there's no way of using this baraita to say this definitively proves that rechuv kani, right? The very most, like the huhadin is just responding to rechuv lo. And the Gemara is saying that's not necessarily true, right? It can also, the same can apply to rechuv, and that's how we read the baraita. But there's no way of reading the baraita, which doesn't mention rechuv, as definitively proving that rechuv kani. All that we can do is say the baraita doesn't prove rechuv lo kani, but there's no way of using that to say it definitely does. And especially given the Gemara continues with another tashma, it seems pretty clear the Gemara does not think we have determined that rechuv kani.
No, I mean, I meant just until the point that we read until I haven't read the rest of the daf, so For all I know, the next Tashma could be Akashi on the conclusion we've
No, but
arrived.
whenever somebody says that,
But who adin the filu?
yeah, when you say he's saying who adin in response to somebody saying he comes to exclude Rechuv, and his answer is no. I could say hu hadin Rechuv, and as I could explain it as hu hadin Rechuv, and the reason why the Mishnah is written the way it was is to teach this distinction with Rabbi Yehuda, but it's not saying that that's the only possibility. He's just saying you can't prove to me that Rechuv is not included because I could always counter you and say no, it is included, and for some other reason the Mishnah didn't write it down.
Yeah.
So we're left not knowing, really.
Yeah, but with the site, like the last thing we end with is a kashi on that, which is then knocked down. Like I think we're leaning toward the Rechuv Kana at the end of this passage.
I mean, I think that's the way that, like some Rishonim read Sugyot, is that like if we keep pushing aside the suggestion, then it must be that really that the suggestion doesn't work, and therefore Rechuv is kind of. But it depends how you want to read it, right? This is the Gemara leaves it open as a possibility, and it only gives us tendencies. It doesn't give us full answers here, and I think that's important. But I mean, I think the very strong answer, of course, is as Rav Nachum put it, we seem to pretty strongly, not fully strongly, but pretty strongly have Shmuel thinking something about Rechuv, which is that it's lakana even by itself. And that's an important, factor in all of this. But Rechuv isn't even going to be our major concern. Will come up, but it won't be our major concern. Our major concern will really be Hanhaga, Meshicha, Gamal, Chamor. So with that, I want to turn to the Rambam. I want to start with him.
Wait, just let me I just want to say one more thing. On the previous page, we had Rav Idi that says, he says, Amar Tani Idi Mosera Lokani, which is the way that Rechuv would be Kone, you see, because how is Rechuv Kone at all? Because he's holding on to the Mosera.
Okay, but Rechuv is not just doing that, right? Mosera Lokani is saying just the act of picking up the reins does not acquire in the case of Hefker. But that's only relevant, that only proves that Rechuv cannot be Kani if you, like Shmuel, switch the attributions of the initial Mishnah in Kilayim, think that Yoshev Bikaron is Pator, and think that Yoshev Bikaron and Rechuv are equivalent, and the only potential difference would be Mosera and Mosera Lokani. But you don't have to follow all those steps, right? That like the fact that just picking up the Mosera is not sufficient is not proof that Rechuv, that in combination with the other elements of Rechuv is Lokani.
Well, I haven't seen up till now anybody saying why Rechuv would be Kone.
I think you'd have to say
other than because he's holding on to something.
Yeah, I think you'd have to say that just sitting on an animal, just the act of sitting would have to be Kone, which might be the whole thing in that in the Mishnah 2 of Kilayim. Why is someone who sits in a karon so feg harabayim, depending on whose opinion it is? Because sitting is a problem, right? Sitting is a major, sitting on an animal, sitting attached to an animal is an action in itself. I think you'd have to say something like that, right? It's its own category that we haven't seen yet.
But that's not a question of kinyan. It's a maaseh. It's a maaseh, but it's not proving any kinyan. It's just proving that there is some action there. Yeah. But but we don't have Rechuv as a category of kinyan. I mean, that's our discussion here.
Yeah,
but the commentaries on the daf, like Rashi especially, are saying that the way that we're understanding, and Tosfos also, is that the way we're understanding kinyan is by Rechuv is because he's tafus, and that's what the Gemara said. Rechuv, why is Rechuv Kone? Hatafus ba, because he's holding it. So once we prove that tfisa doesn't work in a Metzia, we kind of have proven that. I mean, once we not proven, once we have statements to the effect that tfisa, that holding on, doesn't Kone in a Metzia, then we don't have any other basis to have Rechiva.
I mean, the most basic one would be thinking, again, that Shmuel is the one who switches the attributions in that Mishnah, right? Others could counter that no, the attributions in the original Mishnah are correct, and we paskin like the Chachamim, the Yoshev, like in the original, the Yoshev B'Karon
Right.
is so vegetar ba'im that they do impact the animals, they do make them move, and so to Rechuv, regardless of the Mosera, would be kind.
I do
Not necessarily, again, because that doesn't prove that it's just, but that Gemara only that only proves that it's a maaseh, the Mishnah there. It doesn't prove that it's a maaseh kinyan. It just proves that it's a maaseh. If it's not a maaseh, then it's for sure not a maaseh kinyan. But that doesn't prove the contrary. That doesn't prove that if it is a maaseh, it is a maaseh kinyan. It just
I want to jump in. I want to jump in here for once. I want to jump in here for 1 second, if people don't mind. I actually love this discussion about, and I think these are all problems. For the moment, I actually think we should table the question of Rachuv until we get till a couple weeks from now, when we actually finish all the Rachuv questions to see if something, jumps in. And for the moment, I do want to go to Hanhaga and Meshicha. So I apologize. It's a great discussion and incredibly worthy. But for the moment, I do want to look at the Rambam. So if you have the Rambam, you have it in the back of your book, but I don't want you to look there because it doesn't have the Ravad. But I will share my screen with you, and but also if you have your own Rambam, please by all means use that. It's better than my screen. So here's the Yad Chazakah, the Rambam. I want the main thing as we read this. I have 2 questions I want you to think about. Question number 1 is, why did the Rambam writes it the way he writes it? I think there's actually something incredible going on in his literary style in this piece, always, but in particular here. And second, how in the world is the Rambam paskening? Like, where did he get his psak from? I have a hypothesis about that as well. We'll see if you guys like it. Maybe you have something better than I have. So who would like to read Yad Chazakah Rambam Hilchot Gezela ve'Aveda? It's Perek Yud Zayin Halacha He. So again, Hilchot Gezela ve'Aveda. If you're in that's in the Sefer Nezikin in the Rambam, and it's Yud Zayin He. So. It's actually very chaval, I think, that when Bar Ilan organizes these, they organize them alphabetically and not according to the Sefer. So he doesn't teach people how to know which Sefer, which topic is in. Therefore, I don't know it very well. So who would like to read? Noam, you look like you're readable. Go for it.
שניים שראו גמל או חמור של מציאה, וקידמו שניהם, והנהיגוהו או משקוהו, או שהיה אחד מנהיג ואחד מושך, קנו שניהם. במה דברים אמורים? בחמור. אבל בגמל, אם היה אחד מנהיג ואחד מושך, המושך קנה, אבל לא המנהיג.
Okay. Explain the Rambam, and then we'll dive into him.
Well, it is like, I find it literarily weird. So he starts off by saying this like general principle: 2 people who see a camel or a chamor, he makes clear that this is a case of Metzia, and whether they drive or whether they pull, or whether one pulls or one drives, there's no differentiation between who is Kona and who isn't in any of those cases. It seems like at first, but then he narrows it to say Bamid Devarim Amorim. But what is this referring to? It's referring to only the Chamor. But with the Gamal, if one person is driving it and the other person's pulling it, then the person who's pulling it is Kona, but not the person who's driving it.
Great. So question number 1, why, Noam points out it sounds, the Rambam starts you out thinking that that Manhig and Meshicha, right? Number 1, it's only Metzia he's talking about right now. It's 2 people trying to kind of fight over a kinyan here. And that any manner works, except then he says, but actually only with a chamor. So why does he write it that way? Before we get into why he chose chamor as the one that it works for, why does he write it that way?
Like, it would have made just more sense if he wrote Shnaim Shera'u Behema Shel Metzia, and then later Devarim Amorim Bechamor Avalo Begamal. But the way he writes it seems like he's actually contradicting what he said previously. He said Gamal o Chamor.
Exactly. Yeah, he
That
starts
didn't
out,
answer the question, but
both of them work for both kinyanim. Well, let me ask this. When you read through the Gemara, how are you thinking of, okay, Josie, go for it.
So he makes it clear which tzad achad he's picking. I
Good.
mean, he just straight up explicit. There are 4 possibilities, and here is the one that doesn't work.
Good. I think you're almost where I'm thinking about it, which is good because, like, who knows if I'm right or not, but it means that I'm, at least encouraging
At least
people.
we're both wrong, right?
Exactly. I think when you learn the Gemara, Jacob, I see your hand. Go for it. It's
Well, there are 2 things I'm thinking about, not just the idea that there are 4 sides, but looking at the Braita when it's brought, because it raises questions because it seems framed in this way at the beginning, like that it's limiting mostly into Gamal and Manhigim Bachumor, and then it gets into this later phrasing. I think by phrasing it like this, playing with the Ninhu, it's not boxing us into Camel is specifically Mashiach, Humor specifically Manhiga, when one of them can both apply to it.
good. But I think there's one more step here. I think the Rambam's taking us on a journey. I don't mean this as like, it's like, I mean this seriously. When you read the Gemara, before you got to the, right, Ihachi li'ervinhu v'litninhu, what did you think? How many of the 4 possibilities was the Braita saying worked for Gamal and Chamor? 4. Exactly. Like right what Lexi's showing. You think 4. When you start reading the Rambam before you get to his Bamed Devarim Marim, how many things do you think work? 4. And then he says Devarim Marim, that's the Li'ervinhu v'litninu. He's completely following the flow of the Gemara. His teaching follows the sugya. It's amazing, right? I've seen other places where he does this, where the journey of reading the Rambam is the journey of reading the sugya. Like he really thinks he's replacing the Gemara, right? This is amazing here. I don't know, maybe people convinced, people not convinced. I think that's what's going on. Should I say that again? Does that say it again? Okay, great. So no, don't, Jessica, was that a yes? Say it again or don't say it again. Yes or no? I can't tell.
So that was I don't feel like I need it said again.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. So I'm scrolling through, and you happen to make a facial expression as I scroll down, and your box showed up at the top of my window. So,
it was an expression of I personally don't need to. But
fair, great. Yeah, I think that's what's going on. All right, that's part 1. But my second, someone put something in the chat. Let's see, is it? Oh yeah. So my other question is, the Rambam just straight out posted something that was completely suffix in the Gemara, as far as I could tell. Where did he get this from? How did the Rambam end up with this works for Chamor and doesn't work for Gamal? So I want somebody to give me a reading of the Gemara that gets you, or it doesn't have to be the Gemara, love Dafka, that gets you to the Rambam's psak. Hopefully I'm not digging too deeply, but I was very excited by all of this. So I'm hoping to share that excitement with others. I saw it. Did I see a hand?
yeah.
No,
well, the thing that's going to be suggested later is just it's the last option, so he's going with the last option.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Like, what is the last option? So give me that.
Hanhaga Bigamal. In the both cases where we get Ikadamri, Hanhaga Bigamal is second. So he has a tendency to, like, the flow of the sugya points in that direction. So that's how he
Right. So it's an interesting question though, because there's actually a Girsa question about the second half of the sugya, right? Are these the things that are not kana, or are these the things that are kana, right? The word, if you guys look, right, it says, right, this is towards the very end, right? Ihachi hainu Rabbi Yehuda, ika benahu, sadechad de lo kana. Although it makes more sense that it would be chadach tzad echad dekane, because that's the difference with Rabbi Yehuda, is that there's one additional to him, not one, one that doesn't. And in that case, Hanagah begamal would be the last thing, and that would mean that Hanagah begamal does work. So that would go against the Rambam. It's not clear which girsa he has. I think that's one reading that's very good, though, of like where the Rambam gets this from. The sugya seems to end with Hanagah begamal doesn't work. At least the last option they give. Why that order? Because that's the one that we paskin. Good. Any other reasons the Rambam might paskin the way he does? Someone try reading the Breita per the Rambam. Maybe I'm seeing ghosts, but I think the Breita can be read easily like the Rambam. We have a volunteer. I guess I should have warned people about this ahead of time so they had more than 10 seconds to think about it. But Rav Lexi, go for it.
I mean, presumably it's just because chamor is the second thing mentioned in our Baraita, and so you could see like according to the three of these four combos work read of the Baraita, the Oshaya Echad Moshech Be'echad Manhig is referring to the one animal for whom both of these combos work. And since the example given right before that phrase was the Oshaya Manhigim B'chamor, it is easier to read that as being a straight follow-up to the chamor than to the gamal.
Exactly. That's how I think he's potentially doing it, right? He'd say, right, Shnaim Sheyom Mishlim Begamal. Full stop on Gamal. That's all we know about Gamal. And now case 2, Chamor. Umanhigim bechamor she'echad moshech ve'echad manhig, right? For Chamor, it's 2 are manhigim, or one is moshech and one is manhig. And that's the way he's reading the Breita. And that the Rambam paskin that way because he thought it was a better read of the Breita. So not 100% clear, but I think that's a possibility. So, okay. Good. Any thoughts, questions on that? Anybody like it, don't like it? I can't recall right now, but I think I've seen other places before where the Rambam will paskin something that's in Safek per what seems to be like a simple reading of a Breita or something like that. This is not crazy for him. So, and it works. But also I like Noam suggesting that the sugya seems to end with the Ram, the Ram picks the end of the sugya essentially. So okay, as always, a good question. Like how do Rishonim decide? And we'll see the school of the Rosh is going to go a very different direction, right, than this. So I do want to how are we doing on time? Yeah, let's look at Hasagata Ravad because that is always worth it. And actually, well, let's actually, you know what? No, we're gonna do the Rosh. Oh good, this is a fun little debate going on in the side chat. Let's look at the Rosh just based on time, and then we'll come back around to the Rambam later. So the Rosh, if you want, it's in the back of your Gemara right after the Gemara ends. I think you probably have like Piskei Tosfot, maybe like Hashmatot Rashi or something like that. And then you should have Rabbeinu Asher right after. And I think it's like, it's page Zayin in my Oz V'Hadar Morchevet edition, and it's Yud Zayin in the Rosh. But you can look on the screen too if you'd like. So, who would like to read the Rosh for us here? Come on, it's Rabbeinu Asher. You can't get better than this, right? Michael, you're smiling at me, so I'm going to volunteer you. That's the way it goes. You're on mute, though.
Great. Okay. Okay. Moshech Manhin.
Sorry, it should be Ve'ina Be Maniknet, right? In the Rosh.
Oh, there it is. The other Rosh. Okay. I took myself back to the Tosfot.
Fair enough.
Okay. ואין הבהמה נקנית, אלא כדרך שרגילים בהנהגתן. הגמל במשיכה בחמור בהנהגה.
Good.
אבל גמל,
Let's start with that. Just I want to see like what he's
Great,
laid down.
great.
Logically.
okay, so an animal can't be acquired except in the normal manner that one drives it.
Mhm.
The camel through like pulling it, and the donkey through leading it.
Great.
Um,
And by the way, is the Rosh talking about two people, one who's leading, one who's pulling here?
no, it's like a general statement.
Yeah. With the Rambam, you could have understood that if you manhig a camel, right? Hanagah begamal, an individual that may still work. It's not so clear in the Rambam. Here, the Rosh says that doesn't work at all. The Rambam was only talking about the case of two people. So here's already a halachic distinction potentially between the two. Okay, keep going.
Okay. אבל גמל בהנהגה וחמור במשיכה חד מיני הוא קנה. דפליגי הרב יהודה ולא ידינן קנה. But when it comes to a camel that is like led and a donkey that is pulled, one of those two actions acquires, according to Ravanan, who are arguing with Yehuda, but like we don't know which one of those two causes acquisition.
Exactly. Unlike the Rambam, the Rosh leaves us in Safek, right? This is like I'm not going to tell you which one of them is correct, right? And that's going to be there are of course halachic rules of how do you deal with Safek, and that's where he's going to go from here. So
Hilkach ibemeker ibematana lo kan kivan demas bekavan okay mamona bechazkat marim. Right. Therefore, if it's dealing with a case of like business, like buying and selling, that one of them does not acquire.
I think not one of the. Well, yeah, okay, yeah,
like neither. In the sense that when there's a case of doubt, we establish the money, like we hold the money in the presumptive possession of the first possessor, which in this case is the seller.
Exactly. So if you sell me a donkey and I pull the donkey to do my kinyan, it's not my donkey, right? Because Safek.
It's like an ambiguous, right?
So, and in Safek can't remove something from its original owner. Essentially, is the idea here, right?
Right.
So good. Okay, that's the principle number one of the Rosh, right? Mekachu memkar. Well, it's really present other principles up till here. Mekachu memkar. Neither of these kinyanim work. It's actually you end up posking like Rebbe Yehuda in Mekachu memkar effectively, right? So okay, now what is he?
It seems like is he saying something about Metzia?
He's going to say Metzia next. So yeah. So here we go. Michael, keep going for Metzia.
Metzia the hefker kanu shnei. The hazoka hu hamutzaka the ein lahotziah mimenu b'safek. Right, but if the found object or an ownerless object, then both of them can acquire.
Sorry, but anyway, keep going. So,
right, the one who acquires it is the one who is holding it, has the possession of it, and we wouldn't take it away from them in a case of Safek.
Exactly, right. So in a case of Metzia, both kinyanim work. It's actually our original assumption about the Breita before we made essentially kimta on it. That both kinyanim work in the case of Metzia. Because in Metzia, once you've done something that looks kinyan-like in a Safek kinyan, we won't take it away from you just based on a Safek kinyan. So it's kind of fascinating. By the way, what else could the Rosh have said here about the Metzia? How could he have said the other way? Or put it differently, who owns Hefker?
No one. So then we have the Tosfot on 8b where it's like by Hefker, since there's no exchange, there's no transfer. You can't transfer through Masera something.
Yeah, good. That's one version, is that Hefker is ownerless, is completely ownerless. What's the other version of looking at Hefker? This will come up, I think, in a later sugya. Rav Lexi, is that a hand that I saw, or you are? So yeah, okay, yes. Rav Lexi's giving the answer. Everyone look at the possibility is that everyone is Hefker is available for everyone, and that you're actually taking it from everyone in some ways. But the Rosh doesn't seem to be approaching it this way, at least not for this case. So we'll see that. Did we see that already with the? Oh, we did. We saw that of the idea of Metzia, right? We saw the whole thing about that it's like a chov, right? If I take somebody owes a lot of people money, and I take from that person to give to my friend who they owe, I'm taking away from all the other people, and those are similar cases. So did we see that? Is that something that did I make that up, that we saw that already? We did see that already. Okay, yeah, good. Okay, so now, I'm making us go slowly through the Rosh, but I want to really get into this. Michael, keep going. Ve'afal gav.
Afagav de sugya de Gemara, aliba demanda amar rachuv. Aval lemanda amar rachuv lo karne, kanya mashik havan haga. Bein begamal, bein bechamor. Right. So even though our sugya is in accordance with the one who holds that rachuv can acquire an animal, according to the one who says rachuv does not acquire an animal, Meshicha and Hanhaga, whether for a camel or for a donkey, should both work.
Exactly. Why? Why does the Rosh say that? We talked about this a little bit before, but I want to.
I think in the I thought there was a say
But I'm going to take everyone back to the Gemara. Everyone go back to Tet Amud Aleph. Michael, you'll be my guinea pig for this, if that's okay, right? If you go to Tet Amud,
is this the Ihachi?
Yeah.
Ihachi. Right, like if everything works, right? Like if all of these different methods, can acquire for all of the different animals, then we wouldn't need to teach the extended version of the Breita, right? Like we could simplify it if the idea was that these all work equally well no matter what the animal is, right? Like no matter the details. Like we ended up in this place.
Yeah, unless the Breita is not simple, for what reason?
Because it's holding the other way, right?
Because it excludes. Oh yeah, it excludes rechuv, right?
Yeah.
If the Breita is still holding that all four possibilities work, but we wrote this Breita strangely to exclude rechuv, then we have 4 out of 4, and we're good to go.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's really. I don't know. I mean, maybe everyone else figured this out on their own. I read this in the Rosh. I was like, wow, that's really sharp. Of course, he's the Rosh, but I was like, it's really smart that you realize that. Oh yeah, if we hold Rachuv is Koneh, then all the rest of the sugya is unnecessary, and we're still holding 4 out of 4 methods work. So who am I to praise the Rosh? Yeah.
Which I think also it makes sense given the Rosh obviously is often building off of the Tosfot, right? That this is like an intuitive, I think, extension of the way the Tosfot articulate what's being picked up on in the Baraita to learn out the Rechuv Lokani.
Exactly. We saw that last time, right? When the Tosfot say, there's at some point, I have to find it. It's in the Tosfot, Moshechu Manhig in Aval Rachuv Lo. And it says, oh yeah, because Tosfot says, well, why do they exclude Rachuv? How do they? Every list is comprehensive. And this is V'yesh lomar demi mishnah yetera kadayak delir vinu v'lidninu shnaim shegam oshkina oman higim ben bagamal ben machamor. In other words, the fact that Mishnah that the Gemara says this Breita is weirdly worded, it could have been written better. That's why they think that extra wording must be to exclude Rachuv. And if you allow it to do that, then you don't have to say, well, actually, tzad chad lakane, right? Then you can eliminate that. So that's how the Rosh gets there. But the Rosh actually has, it's like a very fascinating end line to this whole thing. So finish this up, Michael.
Mikol makom, Sfarad Hagamara emet de'ein beheman nitneit ela k'mosher gilim b'hanhagata. Right, but in any case, the Gemara's reasoning is correct. And the animal cannot be acquired except in the normal manner of its driving.
Yeah. So in other words, the Rosh is saying, even though the Gemara at that point, if you say Rachuv Lakane, doesn't have to go on this whole path, the truth is actually that path is logical at the end of the day, not for the Rachuv reason, but just reasons of like the way Kinyan works. Kinyan should only work, according to the Rosh, in the normal manner that you would make an animal move, and not in some unnormal manner. So,
and it just so happens that one of the animals has two normal manners.
I think that's what he's saying. Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. That's a great.
And he doesn't know which one is it is.
Yes. So Rashi also says that, right? He says, if you look at, oh, sorry, go for it, Rav.
Yeah. Well, just I think that it's difficult, but I think that's the only way to explain the Chad Sad Delokani position, right? Because like, if it's that an animal can be acquired in an abnormal manner, or that when there's a normal manner and the abnormal manner competing, it doesn't matter, then why would it be different between one animal versus the other, right? It's not clear why that would only apply to one. It seems like it's a bit unsatisfying because it ends up making the Tanakama and the Rabbi Yehuda's dispute a Metzia's dispute, right? They're not disputing actually on the principle at all. The only thing they're disputing is whether one of these combos is the normal manner of acquisition with one of those animals.
Yeah, it's in that way. I mean, I don't know. A dispute of Metzia isn't the worst thing in the world in a Breita, but it's so. But yeah,
well, particularly irksome when we don't even know what Metzia they are arguing about, which animal it is.
Yeah, it's also true. It's there is actually a way to say it. Is it are they actually arguing about the animal, or are they arguing about the manner? Right? Is there one of these animals where the manner works for both animals, or is it one of these actions that works for all animals? Which I think is a different way of looking at this. This may come up in some of the other sources. I think I saw it somewhere, but I do want to throw that out there before we go on break for a minute, for a few minutes. So I don't know if people have thoughts about that, but maybe keep in the back of your mind. In other words, is there one animal that can be kona in multiple ways because it has multiple drachim, or is there one action that people just do for all animals? And therefore that action would work for any animal in terms of kinyan. This may come into the question of like, if we extend this beyond gamal and chamor. So, okay, with that, I will stop my share for the moment. We shall go on a 5-minute break if that's okay. And I'll see you all back here in 5. I wasn't actually paying attention to when we went on break, so I don't know when we're supposed to come back, but yeah, why not? As people will this will be encourage people to come back in. Maybe some people are just sitting there by their computers listening. So I gotta find my document again. Here it is. Okay. Anybody here going to be in the path of totality for the eclipse? No, you live in Yerushalayim, right? Did I get that wrong?
Yeah.
So definitely not. So
I think my family's in Quebec. I think that's like a good place, isn't it?
I know it's gonna be upstate New York. I'm gonna be in Ohio for it. We're gonna my daughter's whole school is going on a field trip to Ohio. It's
Woohoo, Ohio.
Yeah, I know. On the other hand, right now it's predicting cloudy weather, so may not get to see it, but I'm hoping. It's a good way to bring in Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The moon will eclipse the sun. But ignoring the sugya Masechet Sukkah about that eclipses are bad. So for the moment. Okay, let's come back. Let's stop talking about eclipses and talk about animals, behemoths. So, I think what I want to do next is I want to look at the Meiri, who's kind of an interesting position. I don't know, but I'd say in the middle. He's an interesting, different position. And then we'll go and we'll look at the Tur Shulchan Aruch world, about Tur Beit Yosef. I actually don't have the Beit Yosef in here, but I have the Shulchan Aruch, and I don't think I brought the Drisha. So, and then also I would like to look at the Kesef Mishnah at least, and then we'll see. We've got a few other sources depending on time and so forth. But I tried to make sense of the Rav Vad, so maybe we'll try that. But it might just be as a Girsa issue. So, all right, so let's start with the Meiri. So let me share my screen again. And where did I put the Meiri? Probably at the top, because I like the Meiri. There we go.
It's just before the Rambam.
Thank you, Jessica. There we go. Beta Bechira LeMeiri. So yeah, let's see if I can get it all in one. There, kind of all in one. Somebody want to read? I don't know who hasn't read. Jacob, you read today? Jacob.
Meshicha zu shabehema nikneit ba Metzia in tzarich lomar shemaschla behedya o sherachav lav an higa baraglav ela afilu kore lav hiba o sheisha b'makal the ratzo lefanav kolsha akra yad regel v'savto kana kedin mekakument par ben shedarka higa bekach ben she'edarka.
Good.
So like this dragging that the animal is acquired.
Yeah, I would actually call it this super category of Mashicha that the Behema is acquired.
Yeah.
So.
We don't need to say clearly Mashicha or that he was riding on it and leading it with his feet, but even if he called to it and it came, or he hit it with a stick and it ran before him, anything that it like lifts up its back and front foot. I kept on meaning to look up the soft toe and I didn't get around to it.
I had two one. This could be Betsibato, like it's like the translation of Machmato is one. It's not a phrase you see in Gemara, but it's a phrase that you see in Rishonim. The other one was like it could be samech bet bet and it's going around, but I don't think that's it. So I think it's besibat. Yeah, that's my. I mean, people. I was going to bring this up to see if anyone else had suggestions. Those are my two thoughts about what he was using that word for there. But anyway, maybe because of him, right? Machmato.
Yeah.
He's, nah. Right.
Like in the law of Machach Memchar, whether it's the normal way to make it move, or whether it's not the normal way.
But who's he reading against here?
I mean, well, I guess this is reading,
Hint, we just saw it.
It's reading against the Rosh.
Yeah, the Rosh said, right, that you only acquire in its normal the normal manner that you would make the animal move.
Right, yeah.
And in Rosh said, even if you hold that the sugya itself is not necessary because, rochev is koneh, even then it makes sense to me that actually it's got to be in the normal derech, right? Like that's and he says no. So we have to see how's he reading the sugya, right? The sugya seemed to think that maybe that wasn't the case, but he's going to explain, right? Because the sugya was not about a single person being koneh. So
right.
Here, keep reading the Meiri.
I mean, kol makom im hayu שניים זוכים כאחד, והיה אחד מהם זוכה במה שאין דרכו בכך, שבמה שדרכו יראה מסוגיה זו שאותו שדרכו בכך זוכה. מעט הגמל דרכו במשיכה וחמור דרכו בהנהגה.
Okay, good. That works too. Yeah.
In any case, if two merited with an animal at the same time, and one of them merited.
Yeah, I would say zocha here, I think in the Meiri means is doing an action in an attempt to acquire, right? Something like that.
Right.
We'll leave it as zocha because it's trying to translate it directly into English doesn't work well. So.
Fair enough. And one of them was zocha. So one of them was zocha in the abnormal way, and one was zocha in the normal way. We see from this sugya that this one that it was the normal way with the animal acquires or so from now the camel its normal way is with Mashicha and the donkey its normal way is with Hanhaga.
Good. Now of course we have a problem because this sounds like Rebbe Yehuda at this point. It's 2 out of 4, but keep going.
V'cholsa you mostly shneim manhigim ben bagumal ben bachmor kanu.
Good.
So in all the cases that both of them were Moshe or both of them are Manhi, whether it's the camel or the Chumor, they acquire.
Wait, what's the Meiri said something really powerful here, I think. What's he saying?
So if they're both doing the same action, it doesn't matter what the animal is and what the normal way is.
Exactly. Right. They're both doing kinyan worthy actions and they're both doing equal kinyan worthy actions. So therefore, it doesn't matter. Right. The issue is only going to be for him is when one is they're both doing kinyan worthy actions, but one is doing a better action than the other. Right. Which actually flows nicely from our sugya. Our sugya has been all about these, not just our sugya, our several sugyot have been all about this question of, well, what if one action, if they're both doing worthwhile actions, but one action has an advantage over the other, even though individually they'd be fine. He's playing this out really nicely. So I think. Okay, so he's gonna. So did I say hand somewhere? No. Okay, at least I don't think so. All right, keep going.
I mean, but does that really make any sense? I mean, if
You mean-
it's a valid active Kinyan, why all of a sudden does it become a non-valid simply because somebody is doing a more usual type of Kinyan? Either it's isn't it a binary question? Either it's a valid type or not a valid type.
Well, I'll leave it open for the moment, but I have a thought.
I think that your assumption that it's a binary type is incorrect. There are gradations of Kenyan worthiness, and you can have
Right.
less and greater.
Okay, but that's like an unusual thing in halacha. Like I once pointed out, we don't ask the question like a person tries to marry a woman, one by giving a pruta and the other by giving a star, and we say which one is better. They both work. It's unusual to say such a thing, but yeah, it seems like that's what the Mary is saying, and maybe that's what the Gemara is saying.
Yeah. So
I mean, but we also have all kinds of things which are b'diavad versus lachatchila, right? B'diavad.
Yeah, but b'diavad, but if I do something b'diavad and you do something lechatchila, we both did it. In other words, if b'diavad it works, it works. There's no such thing as b'diavad it works, and because somebody else did something that's a little bit more lechatchila, my thing didn't work. If it b'diavad worked, it worked. See what I mean? B'diavad is a lower is a less desirable way to do something, but b'diavad it worked. After you did it, it worked. Usually we think of things as either working or not working.
I think it's actually really interesting in that, like, if we go back to Chet Amud Bet again, should always be back in the Gemara, right? There's several places, but I'll just take one, right? Towards the very end of Chet Amud Bet, right? When we say Tre Gavne Manhig, Ma'odatema, Rachuv Adif Daha Manhig V'Tafisba, right? Kamash Malan, right? That it doesn't, that's not better. But you could take that of one of two ways. Either the whole notion that one kinyan is better than another when the two of them are fighting over it is like ridiculous, and you should never go with that. Or the Gemara is saying, actually, it's a good hava mina, just it doesn't work in this case, right? Maybe because the rains don't count for anything. So, oh, sorry, Rav Nachum, you're on mute right now.
No, I agree with you. The Gemara does seem to be discussing this question for the past two dapim, or maybe that somehow by Kinyan, we are concerned with like somebody who does a more thorough Kinyan. It's almost like Kinyan. In other words, since you're trying to show your ownership of it, we can start asking the question: who is more showing his ownership of it?
Yeah. So, but I see Sarah's hand up, by the way, too. So I wanted to just make sure I acknowledge that.
Yeah, I wonder whether actually what's going on is like, it makes sense to talk about these two modes of Kinyan, one being stronger than the other, Dafka in a case of Metzia. So it's not that like, whereas before they were saying, oh, well, there's one way to think about this is about Metzia or think about it as general Kinyan. But like, actually, maybe what we're saying is, well, yeah, in a case where there's contested ownership over this thing, yeah, it totally makes sense to say there's a kind of like Mahadran way to do it and a not Mahadran way to do it. Those ways work on their own just fine. But like when there's a contest over some like object in Hefker, then it might make sense. That's sort of like pulling together several different readings, but it seems like it might solve the problem.
I think what you're saying is right. Let me go even one step further with what you're saying and say that it's not really Kinyan by Metzia.
Oh.
It's just Chazaka. It's just I am machzik this. So therefore, really, we're asking which. It's kind of like what Tosfos was sort of saying before. It's just who is more holding on to this. Who has got a better chazaka? It's not really Kinyan. Kinyan is when you have two people. You know, like we're saying all along. It's just really who's muchzak bezeh. Who has got it? And we're applying the laws of Kinyan to muchzakut as the best. What is it called? Is the best like proxy for what's going on here. I don't know.
That's like really elegant. The question is just like, why doesn't the Gemara, like, if it's really all about chazaka, then it should say that it's about chazaka, right? Like, I mean, I obviously
Tosfos did spend some time talking about
yeah,
that.
Tosfos does it right. So like maybe I don't know, but it does seem like Or maybe just kinyan is just the way we talk about chazaka when it's from a Metzia. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. That
Right.
here-
Maybe you even use the word kinyan, but maybe it's like maybe the Gemara is conceiving of it as a sort of different kind of kinyan, not not normal kinyan. Well, here you see that he's differentiating.
So there's kinyan that means kinyan and kinyan that means chazaka, and kinyan in a case of being zocher for something from a Metzia, that's really chazaka is what we care about. Yeah, that's nice. I like that answer. Okay, good. And were there other thoughts, by the way, about this piece in the Miri? This is I personally found very fascinating. This is like just for that. I mean, the whole thing is good, but just for that piece, I wanted to include it. So, well,
I mean, why does he say that the Gemara seems to imply that the right kinyan should be done? That's the impression that the Gemara gives. That because that's only Rabbi Yehuda, really, isn't that? Rabbanan don't agree with that.
Well, I think when we make Rabbanan only accept 3 of 4, then
that's again, like we said in the Rosh, it's not necessarily so. If you hold by Rechuv Kone, then but by Rechuv is not Kone, then
so
we still have we don't have the Breita phrase in the like Lervinhu Ninhu way. So maybe that's part of what it's drawing upon.
Yeah, but he could still, like the Rosh, accept that was just to exclude Rachuv, right? I don't know what the Miri was about Rachuv. I didn't look. So I believe, right, the Miri, Lexi, you said this to me, I think, where the Meiri and the Rosh corresponded with each other. Is that right? Or is that was he earlier?
The Meiri and the Rashba. But the Rashba and the Rosh are also pretty much contemporary. So like I don't know of the Meiri being in conversation with the Rosh, but they were contemporaries.
Okay. So he's in that milieu at least, right? And he's living in Provence, not in either Spain or Germany. But it is interesting. There's some questions still, that linger. I think you're right, Rav Nachum. Why doesn't he go the Rosh method? And why does he say it this way? But he seems to go this way. So see, we were saying all right, good. But who is Jacob? You were reading, right?
V'yesh in poskin shmuel zu klal. In ella ein Mashicho anhaga klut. Ben shedarka, ben indarka. Umamkar makol makom divreham hadin kain.
Good.
So, and there are those that don't like make the stock of this teaching at all. They rather it doesn't matter if it's Lucifer Hanhaga at all, whether it's
in other words, there's no, if two people are fighting over it, they're equal essentially at that point. Saying this is the Yad Ramah, the Ramah Reish Mem Hey Ramah opinion essentially. So, and he says, and in Mecca Chumemkar, he agrees, right? That our sugya was just about Metzia. He's looking at Paskin our sugya, but our sugya is only about Metzia. This is kind of like the Rambam, right? The Rambam didn't only say ours was about Metzia, and we'll see it when we get to the Kesef Mishnah. That actually, it's interesting. The Rambam doesn't Paskin anything about this in terms of Mechira, right? So the Meiri is saying that some people, he's not saying what he holds, well, he does. He says that this is correct in terms of Mekach Memkar. There's no priority of Kinyan and Mekach Memkar. In Metzia, there is, right? And this actually fits Sarah and Rav Nachum's reading in many ways, right? That this is about, in Metzia, it's about Chazaka, it's not about Kinyan. So we don't really see a place where one Kinyan trumps another Kinyan. What we do see is one Chazaka trumps another Chazaka.
Wait, but this last opinion that he's quoting is saying, as I understood it, that there's no difference. Doesn't matter what. Doesn't matter whether you did the right thing or not. As long as you did it, it worked.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there's one person's doing Mashiach, one person's doing Hanhaga. It doesn't matter the animal, right? And he says, and that I agree that that's true for Mekach Memkar.
And as that would be, and that would be true for Mechek and Mechar. In other words, that it's binary.
Exactly. So exactly. But
No, what do you mean? I agree. Lidivrehem hadin ken. What does he mean by that?
yeah, I thought he meant
Still in the world of these people who say there is
Yeah.
no distinction by
you're right. It's for them.
Metzia, but in Mechach Memchar, according to them, there would be a distinction, I think is what he's saying.
Oh, I was reading it the other way, right?
Yeah, I know you were.
Yeah.
I don't know who's right, but I was reading it the other way.
I thought he meant the dean follows their words in Mekach Memkar, is the way I was reading it. Ladivrei I was reading according to their words. This is the dean, but maybe you're right. That may be
ובמכך וממכר מכל מקום לדבריהם הדין נוטה.
exactly. That would be a better language.
Okay, well, we don't know what they said, so it's hard to know.
Exactly, it's hard to tell from the Meiri. He's not Meiri's. Sometimes he'll quote who he's talking about. He often quote, but he doesn't. Either he doesn't. He keeps them anonymous, or he gives them nicknames. So it's very hard to tell with him sometimes who he's talking about. So okay, but that's the Meiri is a whole different look in this thing that we've seen. He might be similar to the Rambam in some ways because the Rambam only talked about the cases of two people and only talked about Metzia. So it's possible. Good. Any follow-up questions on the Meiri and so forth until we go? Do we? No, we'll do the Kesef Mishnah later. I'm just thinking about time. I want to go to the tour, Hilchot Avedal Metzia, and then we'll go to the tour again in Mekach Memkar. I thought actually those sometimes when the tour doesn't or teach something in a particular place, I think it's telling. So, good. Let's see who hasn't read and would like to read today. Is anybody? Aaron, did you read yet today? Are you readable today, Aaron? Good.
בהמה של הפקר, הובא אחד לזכות בה, או שניים נקנית כדרך שנקנית במכירה, ולמעלה בהרטיב בסימן קצז. So a behemoth doesn't belong to anyone, and someone comes along and wants to take it, or two people. It's acquired the same way it would be acquired in terms of mechira, as I explained above.
Exactly. So we're going to go there and see what he has to say. But it's interesting that he moves right the Aveda case into Mekach Memkar. I think it's a little bit telling. Okay, so let's go here. This is Kuf Tzadi Zayin in the Choshen Mishpat in Hilchot Mekach Memkar. Go ahead.
כתב הרמה שגמל וחמור שניהם נקנים בין במשיחה בין בהנהגה. אבל אדוני אבי הראש. ז"ל כתב דווקא גמל במשיחה וחמור בהנהגה. אבל גמל בהנהגה וחמור במשיחה היא כאחד מינהו דלא קנה, ולא ידינן המינהו קנה. והי לא קנה, המינהו קנה והי לא קנה. הילקח במחר ומתנה לא קנה אחד מינהו. דו כממונח בחזקת מראה, ובמציע והפקר קנו שניהם.
Good.
So the Ramah said for a donkey and a camel, both of them are acquired either in Mashiach or Hanhaga. The Rosh says a donkey by Mashiach, a Chamor by Hanhaga, but a Gamal by Hanhaga and a Chamor by Mashiach, one of those doesn't work, but we don't know which one it is. Therefore, when we're talking about Mechar and Matana, neither of them works. And we establish the property stays within the purview of its owner. And in terms of Metzia and Hefker, but either of them works.
Good. So this is really right. He brings the Ramah, right, who seems to be the end of the Meiri there, that neither really has preference. Does he ignore our whole sugya? Does he just not so clear? I mean, there's a way to ignore it, as we've seen. And then he brings his father, the Rosh, which we saw before, right? Who says because it's a safek, right? It works in Metzia, it doesn't work in Mekach Memkar.
Why does it work in Hefker?
So the idea, well, we'll leave it open again. We talked about it a little bit before. Why does it work in Hefker?
Yeah,
go for it, Aaron.
even just in the context of what he's saying, the framing when we don't know that it does or doesn't work, we fall back to okay mamona b'chezkat mare. But in the case of hefker, there's no mare who is to be okayed, and so we're going to be more lenient.
But one of them acquired it, maybe. One of them did it the right way. We just don't know who.
Could it be that the other way of reading Hefker, that they were all with Okemomono B'chezkat Mare, we could read it as Hefker as no one owns it, or everyone has a right to it. So could we maybe read it like if they both already had that right to it?
I don't think.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think.
what if
I don't
somebody? What
think-
if a third party went and grabbed it from them?
is when he says kanu shnehem, it seems like he's not talking about two people being konim, as opposed to each of these cases a person is konim. But I don't think he's talking about kanu shnehem, meaning
this is the single person acquiring here. So I think it's both methods.
Meaning that in a case where it's hefker, there's no default owner, so there's no claim against which your questionable claim is being weighed against.
So even though it didn't work, it works? Even though you didn't do the right Kenyan, it works?
Well, can I put it differently, Rav Nachum? And this maybe plays into the whole theory we've been building here, is that if in Mekach Memkar, if you sell me an animal and I use the wrong Kenyan, we just don't know if it's the right or wrong Kenyan. I have a chazaka on the animal, but you have a stronger chazaka because you were the original owner. We know you owned it. I'm in safek of owning it. So I have my chazaka is weaker of having this animal. So you win. But in the case of Metzia, right, where there's nobody else has a competing has a greater chazaka on it, therefore I get to win for Metzia. So it's about chazaka, it's not about kinyan, really, in the same way. This is proof that there can be competing levels of chazaka, but there may not be competing levels of kinyan in that sense. I like this theory, so I'm going to build it for a while because it was good. It wasn't my theory, but it's really good. So okay. Good. That's the tour. The Beit Yosef, before his start here is from the Bedek Habayit, which I think people probably know. The Bedek Habayit he added later, but it actually gets into, like, Jessica, it was your very first question that we had at the very beginning. So I thought it was, I didn't include it. I included it because I had the question too, but it's like we get to come around to the beginning of Shir. So let's do the Beit Yosef. Let's see. Aaron, keep reading. You're doing everyone's doing a nice job, but since it was a short piece,
Bedek Habayit. V'yoter nira lomar shema shekatav b'perek sheni o shekisha v'ratzta b'fanav hainu hanehiga.
Good.
Ushma mina the
I want you to translate that piece in the Bedek Habayit because I think that's Jessica's question. So
that both when we talk about you hit it and it moves, that's hanhaga.
Yeah, that's how I was imagining. Maybe because I'd read this before throughout the sugya, I was imagining when it says as opposed to mashicha, hanhaga is someone's behind it hitting the animal with a switch. And I tried so hard to get Da Vinci to create a picture for me of somebody doing that, and it didn't do it. Instead, it gave me a backwards animal and a backwards person switches behind me. So what can I say? I tried. AI is not there yet. All right. Anyway, keep going for the Beit Yosef.
Or I guess nehiga. But
higa, something like that. Yeah, it's who knows what the Beit Yosef grammar was there. So
I think the AI didn't know that the word switch means a stick, and they switched the direction.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
If you had said driving it with a stick, you might have got better luck.
I might have got better results. That's good.
Not driving, hitting it with a stick. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Ushma mina the Mashiach vanhaga kanya l'Rambam ben b'mecher ben b'matana ben b'metzia loshna b'gamal loshna b'chamor zulati shebechad mashach v'echad hinhig hagamal daz moshech kana manhig lo kana. So you should understand from this that for the Rambam, almost anything works, except in a case where you have a camel, two people are each trying to acquire it. One is doing Mashicha, one is doing Hanhaga, and then Mashicha wins out.
Yeah. So, which I don't know if that's the only way to read the Rambam, but it's not a bad way. Essentially, it's like all kinyanim work in all cases, and there's one exceptional case with a gamal where hanhaga doesn't work in the place where somebody's doing mashiach at the same time for whatever reason. A gamal is like the exception to the rule, and nothing. I don't know if he means to understand it like to the extent that we're only talking about gamal and chamor, or is he like in all animals gamal is the only one that's an exception? I'm not sure if he's going that far, but he might be. So okay.
Seems like he's saying just the gamal.
Yeah, I think so too. The gamal is a particular case. Maybe it's something about the mitziut of a gamal that hanhaga just doesn't work in the place of mashicha. I don't know. So Rav Lexi, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think there is something interesting thinking about the gamal potentially as a somewhat exceptional case. I feel like if people think about like paradigmatically how they envision like people imagine the camel caravans and like the people walking in front, like holding the reins of the camels, right? It's like, is it that this is just so classically, like either that is so classically the way that you lead a camel that nothing else can sort of outweigh it, right? Or that like, yeah, there isn't really another, because like, I don't think that I've almost ever seen somebody, or obviously not just in person, but like, I can't even conjure an image of someone like sitting on a camel, like getting it to go by like kicking it. Like I've genuinely only ever seen people like leading camels. So like, yeah, maybe it is where there's other animals where there's like a lot more ways of getting them to go. But I don't know if that's unique to Africa camels. I feel like there must be some other animals that like have only particular forms of like effective leading, but I don't feel so bucky in.
My dog might be one of them, but that's yeah. Rev Nachum, sorry, you were saying something.
Just that they do actually race camels in various Arab countries where they sit on them, and they hit them.
But with their feet or with a stick? They have a stick that they use to hit them.
I think a stick. I've actually, yeah, I never saw. I've seen it like in a video, but I think it's with a stick. You can look it up. There is such a thing as camel racing.
I've seen ostrich racing, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised. So that was they were using carts, pulling people on carts, though. The ostrich is not on their backs, but yeah. The other possibility, this is maybe crazy, but maybe not. It is like we talked about this last week, I think, maybe a couple weeks ago, of like when two people are trying to do two competing actions on an animal, like who's actually making the animal move. It could be that for a camel and for some other animals, like Moshech is what's actually making the animal move. Hitting with the switch, with the camels being pulled, it's ignoring the other guidance, as opposed to other animals who might get a little confused, who might try to react to both of them. I know I'm trying to maybe make it too much work with reality, but you could imagine that. At least I could imagine that. Maybe you can too. So, okay, we got of course we haven't we haven't done the Ravad yet either, and we have to paskin. So Aaron, finish us up in the Beit Yosef. Oh, Aaron, you're on mute. Sorry.
It's only been COVID for 4 years, so I'm still like not over here. There's no COVID in Israel, but Vedat Haravad, Perak Hanizkar, Dan Haga Begamal, Mashiach Bechamor Speka. The Ravid says when you switch around the Hanhaga and Mashiach to the one that's not described in the Gemara, then it's actually not clear what happens.
Yeah, it's like similar to the Rosh, although the Ravad has, when we see him inside, he's a little different, but yeah. So, but
sorry.
No, keep going, please.
ולעניין הלכה נראה דכיוון דערף והרמה מסכימים לדעת אחת בזה הכי נקיתנן.
So good. We follow the Ramah, right? And the Ramah essentially said, like the Rambam, that he says, well, it's maybe not like the Rambam. The two of them just work equally, and there's no problem there. So it might be like the Rambam. We'll see. We'll see the Shulchan Aruch paskin. This is unusual, right? Is that the Shulchan Aruch is paskening per the Rif and the Ramah, and not the Rambam and the Rif. So against the Rosh. So. Also, I couldn't find this in the Reef. I think I saw somewhere, maybe in the Beit Yosef, where I didn't bring it, where he said, because the Reef is silent on this whole thing, it means that he must think that none of this is halacha. It was kind of the way he put it. So, but let's look at the Shulchan Aruch.
Well, that is the rule. That is the rule.
If the Reef doesn't say it, he doesn't think the sugya is worthy of halacha.
Yeah, I
Essentially,
think that's common. That's a common explanation.
yeah. So, Tov. Finally, Shulchan Aruch. Who would like to? Aaron, finish us up, and then we're going to come back. We're going to circle back after this, but go ahead.
שתיים שראו גמל וחמור של מציע, וקדמו שניהם, והנהיגוהו או משכוהו, או שהאחד מנהיג ואחד מושך, קנו שניהם. באמת דברים אמורים, בחמור. אבל בגמל, אם היה אחד מנהיג ואחד מושך, המושך קנה אבל לא המנהיג. So he follows the Rambam.
Exactly. So
what about a horse?
Great. This is the whole problem with this, right? This whole thing is so narrow. So the question is Gamal paradigmatic? Or is it a completely is it a sui generis case? And everything, it doesn't matter what Kenya.
It seems like from the Beit Yosef that Gamal is sui generis. Otherwise, he could have just said, "Here's what." Otherwise, it's not an if it's here's what happens with Gamal and here's what happens with Chamor, and I'm only going to tell you the exception, which is Gamal. Then Gamal is not actually an exception.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is interesting that all these animals are also animals that are open to riding, right? Chamor and Gamal, both of them are ridden. So if you're Rochev Manhig Biraglav, is that Kona? Does that beat all of these? Not so clear. So,
well, you know what the answer might be. You'll never be able to get on a horse. If you see a wild horse, you'll never get it. But maybe a donkey and a camel are a little bit more tame. Maybe. I mean, I'm just saying, possibly. I mean, ultimately, they're just limiting themselves to what's said in the Gemara and leaving it, not putting their head, not extrapolating something that isn't explicit.
So that is an interesting, right, approach to codes, right? Codified halacha, or is that until someone writes you a she'ela, you don't extend yourself beyond what the text actually says, right? You leave it to what the text says, and you try to understand it the best you can. And then with you get a particular question of two people were fighting over I don't know, an ostrich, and one of them was pulling it and one of them was pushing it, which one is kone, and then you have to decide, well, does that fit into the gamal, does that fit into chamor, which category does that work in? But good. All right, at least one final, maybe the final source. So I want to go, if you remember the Rambam, I want to go to the Kesef Mishnah. The Kesef Mishnah, of course, is as far as I know, the Beit Yosef's last work that he authored before he died. So he already knows, right? He's already written the Beit Yosef. He's already written the Shulchan Aruch by the time he gets here, which I think Rav Landis has pointed out to me that sometimes the Kesef Mishnah is there to help. It's not its only goal, but one of the things he will do is justify his own paskening in the Shulchan Aruch when he writes the Kesef Mishnah. So, all right, who would like to read? Final reader for the day, maybe. Max, have you read today?
No, but I'm not prepared to take this on.
Okay, fair enough. It's anybody else who I think, has everyone read? It's been that kind of day. Great. I don't know, maybe so Noam, can we call on you again? Is that
Sure. Shnaim sheru gamal o chamor shel Metzia v'chulei. Katav. I thought he was referring to the Magid Mishnah here.
He is. Harav HaMagid.
Harav HaMagid. Okay.
Yeah.
Katav Rav HaMagid והכוונה שבגמל גופי אם היו שני מנהיגים קנו שניהם וכולי. Okay, so two who saw a camel or a donkey that was found, etc. And then the Magid Mishnah said that the intention is with the camel itself. If two drove it, then they both acquired it.
In other words, right, as opposed to, right, even though the Gemara says, right, talks about a gamal is usually done by meshicha, right? And then if one is moshech and one, the way the Rambam, actually, I'll bring us back to the Rambam here, right? The Rambam says, right, for a gamal, if I can find it very quickly, here we go. Aval b'gamal im haya chad manhig v'chad moshech hamoshech kana aval lo manhig, and he's saying, but if both people are manhigim the gamal, it does work. Right, that's the big chiddush here. Okay, it's not such a chiddush. It seems that the Rambam thinks that. He just doesn't say it explicitly. So here we go. Datolamar.
Datolamar sheRabbeinu mefaresh dechi amrinan le'ervinahu ve'litninahu shnaim shayu mashchin v'manhigim bein begamal bein bechamor hainu lamar de'itana hachi hava mishtama de'bein hayu shneim mashchin begamal Uvechamor, uven shneim manhigim. They said begamal, but I thought it meant begamal uvechamor.
It does, yeah, it does, yeah.
So yeah, okay. Ben haya echad moshech ve'echad manhig, ben begamal, ben bechamor, kanu shneihem. So okay. The Magid Mishnah's intention is to say that the Rambam is interpreting the words in the Gemara that they should swap it and they should teach. I
think, by the way, Le'Ravinu, I think this came up before. I would read it as mix them up, right, and more than swap, right? But as I said,
even better, combine them.
Combine them. I like that. Combine them and teach them. Yeah. So
in other words, put it all in one baba, in one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
So when the Gemara said that and gave this alternative version, that was in order to say that if it had taught that version, then it would have meant that regardless of if they both did Mashicha for a camel or for a donkey, or if they both did Hanaga for either of those animals, or if one did one for the other, or one did one for the other, there would be kinyan no matter what, without any difference.
This is what I was calling the 4 of 4 scenario, right? 4 out of 4 things work. So, all right. So at that point in the Gemara, when it says, well, mix it up, sorry, what was the word you used, Rav Nachum? No, it was better.
I think combine it.
Combine them. Yes, combine them and teach it. Right. At that point, it was assuming all 4 kinyanim worked. Okay. Okay, so keep going. V'chi mitaretz.
V'chi mitaretz ika chad tzad delo kane hainu lomar denehi im hayu shnehem moshkim begamal o bechamor v'chen im shnehem hinigu begamal o bechamor kanu shnehem mihu hechad echad mashach ve'echad hinhig chad kane ve'echad lo kane Ikadamri moshech bechamor, klomar she'im echad mashachli ve'echad hinhig hachamor manhi kane moshech lo kane aval begamal afilu echad moshech ve'echad manhig kanu shnehem. Anyway, he's just giving a long-winded version of the 3 out of 4 scenario with us not knowing which one it is.
Well, good, except he's actually doing something really interesting, which he's saying it's not really 3 out of 4, right? There's actually a lot more cases because it's the cases of 2 people doing 2 actions, right, on 2 different animals. And so, there's the case where both are doing Hanhaga on 2 different animals. There's a case where both are doing Mashicha on 2 different animals. That's 4. There's the case when one's doing, it's actually 6 cases total. One's doing Mashicha and one's doing Hanaga on the Chamor, and one case where one's doing Mashicha and one's doing Hanaga on the Gamal. And he says, out of those 6, we started thinking 6 out of 6, and now actually when the Gemara says Ika Chadsad Delokane, it only means 1 out of those 6. So 5 out of those 6 work, right? But one of them doesn't work. And one of them has got to be one of the mixed cases, of course, right? And that's the one that doesn't work. So should I say that again? This is like in my head a little bit.
Yeah, wait, yeah. Could you say the cases in the 3 out of 4 and then the cases in the
good.
So it might be helpful to think. I always say it in the way like what's doing the right action versus and the wrong action. You're supposed to saying moshechet. In other words, just think of, then you can reduce the number of cases. In other words,
good. Yeah. It's well, the reason I want to extend them is what the Rambam, the Rosh was reading it as one of these actions doesn't work for one of these animals, right? The Rambam is reading it, or at least the way that they're understanding the Rambam reading it is, right? One of these combinations doesn't end up with yachloku in one of these animals, right? And so there's a total of 6 combinations there, right? There's either 2 people for each. If 2 people are doing meshicha, there's 2 animals, right? So there's 2 cases of 2 people doing meshicha. There's 2 cases of people doing hanhaga. All 4 of those work, right? The only question is in the case of where one's doing meshicha and one's doing hanhaga, right? One's with the gamal, one's with the chamor. In one of those cases, it's not yachloku. In one of those cases, instead, one person gets the animal. And that's all that the Rambam is trying to decide is which is, or the Gemara is trying to decide is which of those cases it is. All right. And therefore, even if you're doing the low kedarka method on one of the animals, if both of you guys are doing that same method, you both get it's still yachloku. You still split the animal at that point.
I mean, you also have a case, I'm doing the wrong action with the gamal, and you're doing the wrong action with the chamor.
True.
That also would be presumably kone.
Exactly.
And then I'm doing the right action with the gamal, and you're doing the right action with the chamor. We're each doing exactly right, then we're both kone also.
Yeah. So, because we're not fighting, and we're not even fighting each other in that case, right?
Right. Okay. Right.
Animals.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I give you a wrong case. But never mind.
Yeah. No, but you're right. Actually, that falls out of this too. Is that if it's just one person, it also works. So, אחד קני ואחד לא קני, איכא דאמרי משך בחמור, כלומר, שאם אחד משך ואחד הנהיג, החמור, מנהיג קני, מושך לא קני. אבל בגמל, אפילו אחד מושך ואחד מנהיג, קנו שניהם. Right? And איכא דאמרי the other way. He's just going to go through all the cases here, so we can skip. לא קני. אבל בחמור, אפילו אחד מושך ואחד מנהיג, קנו שניהם. Upasak, yeah, so start with upasak here, Noam. And then we can
Ufasak Kalishna Batra. And he paskins like the last language.
Good. I think he means his last language, but he also might mean the last language in the Gemara, as you happen to say, right? All right. And now we've got one. He's got a problem with the Rambam, though, so I want to throw this in here, and this is, I think, important. V'yesh litmoa.
V'yesh litmoa lama lo katav Rabbeinu beperek bet the mechira. שהבהמה נקנית בהנהגה, ודוחק לומר שרבנו מחלק לומר דהנהגה קנה דווקא במציאה והפקר דמנה ליה. So, okay, there's this problem. Why didn't the Rambam write in the Perek Bet of Mechira that an animal can be acquired through Hanaga? And is this it would be a bad answer to say that the Rambam differentiates basically between Metzia and Mekach Umimkar, because the Mana Leha, where does he get that from?
Yeah, something that to make a claim without having some backup to it is a little bit crazy. So, but clearly people are saying that, the fact that he happens to bring it up. So, and actually we've seen, right, we haven't seen this with Hanaga, right? This is about the action itself, but we have people differentiating between Mekach Umimkar and Metzia in other cases. So, maybe not so crazy, but okay, what's his answer?
ושם יש לומר שסמך על מה שכתב פה ויותר נראה.
Yeah, so that's answer 1.
So okay, Shema is he's hedging. Maybe you could say that he's relying on what's written here, what he wrote here.
In other words, if you want to learn how do okay, I didn't say Hanhagan in Hilchot Mechira, but I said it in Hilchot Metzia, so you can know that it works for Mechira too, right? That's maybe that's what the Rambam's doing. But he has another possibility.
ויותר נראה לומר מה שכתב בפרק ב' מהלכות מכירה, או הקישה במקל ורצה לפניו, היינו הנהגה. And it seems better to say that what he wrote in Perek Bet of Hilchot Mechira is, or you could account to it.
He wrote
The words, when you hit with a stick and it runs before, that's Hanhaga.
Exactly. Right. This, we saw this in the Bedek Habayit as well, right? He said, no, he just didn't call it Hanhaga there. He called it something else. But he had it in Hilchot Mechira as well. So, okay. With that, I think this is probably a good closing place. I don't know if there's any final comments, final thoughts. I will say, right, we've seen that our sugya, it's not so clear. Is it dealing with, do these individual actions work for kinyan at all? Are they only talking about kinyan bimkom another kinyan, right? Are they only talking about metzia? Are they talking about mekuch memkar? Is it a safek? Is it something we can paskin, or do we paskin it as a safek? And how do we paskin sfekot, right? In that case, is there a difference between if it had a chazaka of having an owner before or not? Is Gamal just an exception, or is it a paradigm of other such cases where Chamor, Hanhaga, and Meshicha are both Darka, and so that's the reason they both work, or not? And also just to put in, right, Rav Nachum's point of, this is kind of this very strange thing where we see the possibility of two competing methods where one, even though both work, one might be better than the other. So with all that, I think that's most of what we've seen. We've seen some other things here as well today, but hopefully, I don't know, anything final to close beyond what I have. Good. We still haven't determined Rachuf, so that's although there's a nice side chat going on about it, so you can look there, and we'll get more of that in the next coming weeks. So.
Yeah, Yishakach, Joel. Thank you very much. I'm glad to see halacha, which we're supposed to be seeing. You're being motze, all of us yidei chova. Next week, I want to continue as pretty much just Rashi and Tosfot. I don't have any Rishonim. I don't think I'm going to send you any Rishonim to look at. I want to sort of hurry up, so try to go as far as we can. Certainly not past the Mishnah, but I don't know how far we'll get. But I want to look at the. I want to go as fast as possible with still giving Tosfot their due. Joel.
Baruch Tiyeh. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Josie.
If you looked at that Rambam in Hilchos Mechira, did you look at that Rambam in Hilchos Mechira?
I did, but it was a couple weeks ago at this point. Let's see. Hilchos Mechira is in.
It's Kinyan.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's actually beautiful. I don't even understand. I think I actually read this. I don't have any notes on it. I read this Kesef Mishnah before, or I saw him say the same thing somewhere else. But I read this Kesef Mishnah before you suggested us to read it. But
Halacha Hey.
Vav, I think.
Vav, okay. Guess
Is it Hey? No. Look at Hey. Look at Vav. Look at Vav.
Ketzad konim b'behema mashicha. Ein tzarich lomar im mashcha v'halcha o shirachava leha v'halcha bo shekana.
Period. Wait, stop there. First of all, Ein tzarich lomar it's very funny that he writes that. You know why is it funny?
Because it's pshita for him, but it's not so pshita.
No. But there's another reason why it's funny. Well, I'm fixated on these Mishnahs in Kiddushin.
Yeah.
And so it's not mentioned in the Mishnah in Kiddushin that Mashiach. Remember, I made that point that the Mishnah in Kiddushin doesn't say, when it defines what Mashiach is, doesn't say Mashiach.
So, and nonetheless,
so he says, Ein sarich lomar im mashcha v'alcha. In fact, the Mishnah didn't need to say it.
It was so obvious. It didn't need to go.
The Rambam is not inventing that it's Ein sarich lomar. The Mishnah is telling me Ein sarich lomar because the Mishnah didn't say it.
So,
I
and I
think
assume
it's funny.
Rachav alea v'halcha bo, right?
And then he says, "Oh, sherachav alea v'halcha ba shekana." I think that this is not surprising. This is not contradicting anything, because no, not necessarily. I'm saying Rachuv is static. Our whole sugya is talking about Rachuv that is static.
Yeah.
And it's tfisa, as Tosfos says.
And here it's you.
Therefore, we were never talking about Rachuv that he went because of it. That's obvious that he's kone. That's not Rechiva, really. That's Mashicha. That's a sug of Mashicha. Ketzad konim be'ema b'Mashicha. Well, if you ride on it, and it moves, that's called Mashicha, like Rashi said. It moves its legs, it's Mashicha. Our sugi is not talking about this at all.
So literally sitting on the animal and it just stays in place. So,
yeah, you put a baby on the animal. It's the baby kone, the animal, you know?
Yeah. Well, it can't anyway. It doesn't.
Well, it's a child, maybe. But actually, no, a child can kone. You just can't machzir. Well, I don't know, maybe a 7-year-old.
Yeah, okay. They have enough dot that, yeah.
Okay. Ella afilu karala. So I don't understand the base. I don't understand the Kesef Mishnah's question. It's obvious. Ella afilu karala. Uba. O shekisha b'makel v'ratzta lefanav. Kevan she'akra yad v'regel kanya. I don't even see the place for the Kesef Mishnah to even question whether the Rambam holds whether he holds that Hanhaga works.
I think it.
Lama lo katav Rabbeinu shabehema niknet behanhaga. Well, he's writing it right here.
Yeah, well, I think I think it might be a word choice that he's bothered by, right? Because he's got Mashicha, right? It's like Ketzad konim b'Mashicha. Here are like the subcategories of Mashicha, right? But he doesn't have this another super category called Hanhaga. He just has these other methods. So,
well, he's defining what Hanhaga is.
Yeah, but he doesn't use the word at the end.
Right. So you're saying it's a linguistic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
It's still weird. It doesn't sound like it's as big a problem as the Kesef Mishnah makes it out.
Yeah. I mean, he mentions this. He mentions Vav. He mentions Vav, or he mentions Hey. No, he mentions Vav.
Vav. Yeah. In fact, if you look here in Hilchot Mechira, right? He says, "Ayin b'mashi katavti b'perek Yud Zayin Hilchot Gezela." So,
where?
In the Kesef Mishnah here.
Oh, in the Kesef Mishnah.
Yeah. So he wants you to go see that's what we just read. But
wait, okay, wait, let me just finish it. V'hu sheimshoch b'fnei habaylim. אבל אם משך שלא בפני הבעלים, צריך שיאמר לו קודם שימשוך, לך ומשוך וקנה. He has to direct him to do it.
Yeah, that's that's playing on the. We're going to see that, right? Where he says liknot. He does not liknot. It has to say kne. Right.
So
instruction.
He doesn't talk about Metzia here.
No. Well, it's Hilchot Mechira.
Right. Where does he talk about Metzia?
In Hilchot Gezela V'Aveda, I think, right?
That was what you were quoting.
Yeah. So.
All right, okay. You have to go get your kids.
I do. Thank you. And I won't be here next week because I'll be potentially watching the eclipse. So.
Can I see it in Jerusalem?
No, I don't think so. You might get partial, but I'm not sure. That's.
Although, can you ever really see an eclipse, or can you just not
see the lack of the sun? I think you can. I think you can see the corona, right? Is that
That's
right?
True. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've never seen one, so I'll have to tell you what. I'll have glasses.
As long as you're not flying to Nova Scotia to see it.
Yeah.
Then you're not vain.
So wow.
You know what I'm talking? You know what I'm referring to?
No. What's the Nova?
Oh, there's a song from the 70s. You're So Vain. By Carly Simon.
Okay, yeah.
And in it, she says, you fly to Nova Scotia to see the total eclipse of the sun, I think that is. Is this a solar eclipse also?
Solar eclipse, yeah.
So she says, you're so vain, you fly to Nova Scotia to see this total eclipse of the sun.
Yeah, no, not doing, just going to Ohio. So,
Okay.
all right. Thanks, Rav Nachman.
Shkoyach, shkoyach.
Yeah. See you later.
See you.